All right. I think we are live. As always, I have no clue how many people are watching. The numbers are never accurate. And I just posted that I'm going live. So right now, viewer count is at a grand total of one that nope, that's just zeros. That's okay. I figured that I would start. I will get the easy stuff out of the way. Thank you to the people who are out here. And huge thank you to Den, who is helping me out with the moderation. So if anyone's making evil comments or anything, Den is going to help out. He's also commenting in the comments as me, but he is there. I also want to remind everybody that you can always support me by doing this thing right over there at patreon.com/Hemant. And if you have a question you want answered, you can always leave a super like, and we will get to as many comments and questions between stories as we can. And that is always appreciated. So thanks. I hope you're having a good Friday night. Why don't we start out talking by talking about our friend Kim Davis, who is somehow back in the news again. This is the story in the Wall Street Journal, and I feel like, yeah, this is the one we should all be paying attention to and talking about. So, in case you don't remember this, I will come back to this headline in a second. But Kim Davis is this former county clerk from Kentucky who made headlines in 2015. And if you were not around in 2015 or you were not paying attention to church state stories in 2015, she was like the centerpiece of all church state story activity. Like, she fed the blogosphere for many months. And I thought this story was over, but I'm very glad I get the chance to talk about her again. So she's in the news because she just lost a case, which we'll talk about in a second. But basically, in 2015, she was the county clerk in Rowan County, Kentucky. She's the person you go to when you want to get government papers signed and everything. And in 2015, this is after the Obergefell ruling, same sex marriage was legal everywhere in the country. And so a couple of guys, David Ermold and David Moore, the Davids, they decided, well, you know what? If this lady's threatening not to sign paperwork for gay couples, we were thinking about getting married anyway. Let's go to the courthouse and let's have her sign our marriage certificate. And they went there. And she's a government employee. Her religious beliefs should not matter. She refused to sign their marriage certificate. Like, they would have had to travel to a different county clerk if they wanted to do something that was like legal everywhere in the country. That wasn't allowed. So they filed a lawsuit, and this went on for a while. Um, I should say that, these lawsuits were, it's almost like suing a pharmacist for not dispensing birth control, except even that's not quite the same because a pharmacist is not a government employee. So anyway, the reason I want to bring this up is at the end of that lawsuit, the state of Kentucky had to pay out like $225,000 in legal fees and all of that stuff, which is really taxpayer money. So Kim Davis lost, but Kentucky taxpayers paid the price because they're the idiots who elected her. And Kentucky had no business allowing one of their employees to deny a same sex marriage this ability to get married. So the reason she's in the news this week is because these guys filed a lawsuit against her specifically. And this past week, a jury heard this case and they decided, and let me pull up this headline one more time. This jury decided that Kim Davis owes those two men $100,000. Not the state of Kentucky, but Kim Davis specifically. So the amazing thing is Kim Davis's lawyers said she had qualified immunity. They should not have been allowed to sue her because she was a state employee and she was immune from these types of lawsuits. The problem with that is that the National Conference of State Legislatures makes clear, and this is just kind of summarizing laws across the country, that qualified immunity doesn't count if a government official violates a clearly established constitutional right. And same sex marriage is a clearly established constitutional right. Even the Supreme Court says so. So you can't just say I'm immune from lawsuits because I am a county clerk. So, she fucked around. Now she's finding out. I would say $100,000 isn't nothing. I don't want to diminish that amount. And it's exactly what the couple asked for. So they got exactly what they wanted. But I do think $100,000 is almost more symbolic than it is useful. Like $100,000 is a lot, but it's probably not going to change their life. They're not going to retire and go on a vacation for the rest of their lives. And part of the problem with that is this couple whose marriage license she refused to sign, the certificate she refused to sign, like they are forever linked to Kim Davis. If someone asks, like, what was your wedding day like? It's like, well, let me tell you about this lady. You can't talk about their wedding without mentioning her name. So $100,000 will help ease the pain, but it won't erase it. The men's lawyer said that the client sought damages due to the mental anguish that they suffered. And they are also planning to ask for attorney's fees as well. So again, I'm glad they won. I don't know that it erases the harm she caused them. Here's another thing that's very interesting about this case. Another couple whose marriage certificate she refused to sign also sued Kim Davis in a personal capacity. A different jury heard their case this week, and that other jury said, we're giving you guys $0, which I don't really understand why. I have not read any good articles explaining why that jury said this couple gets nothing, while a different jury said the Davids should get $100,000. But Kim Davis's lawyers are celebrating the fact that in one of these cases, she doesn't have to pay anything because they say she did nothing wrong. So disappointing in that capacity. I should also say Kim Davis's lawyers at Liberty Counsel, the right-wing legal group, say they plan to fight this decision. They're going to appeal it, and their hope is that they can keep appealing this all the way to the Supreme Court, which 6 of their friends are on. And their hope is that not just that they reward and give victory to Kim Davis, but that they overturn Obergefell completely, turning, the same-sex marriage, giving that back to the states to decide so that red states everywhere can say, we're not honoring same-sex marriages. I don't think that's going to happen, even in our political climate, but they're not hiding the fact that that's what they want to do. Here's another thing I'm very excited to talk about because Kim Davis is back in the news this week, which is the utter hypocrisy when it comes to Kim Davis's personal life. Because the whole reason she refused to sign same-sex marriage certificates is because she said, she wants to honor the sanctity of marriage. That's why all these conservative Christians say they oppose gay marriage, right? But let me tell you about Kim Davis's marital history here. See if you can follow this. This is a woman who married husband 1, had twins with husband 3. Not a typo, that is correct. She then divorced husband 1, married husband 2, divorced husband 2, then married husband 3, then divorced husband 3, and then remarried husband 2. That is where we are at today. She's been married 4 times, twice to the same person, but she skipped. There was another guy involved between there. I'm just saying, I don't think that's what Jesus wanted. I don't know. Hypothetical guess there. And when people kind of called her out on that, like, who are you to talk about the sanctity of marriage? And why are you saying I can't possibly sign a marriage certificate for 2 gay men? Now, someone else signed my marriage certificate to my 4th husband. Whenever people brought that up, she said it's all divine irony. She's like, God took a woman who was married 4 times and used her to defend marriage against the gays. Isn't that so mysterious of God? That's honestly how her response to this has been. Meanwhile, the state of Kentucky still had to pay a price in court costs and attorney's fees for allowing her to be a public servant. It almost makes me wonder, is anyone better off after interacting with Kim Davis. I honestly can't tell. I did want to show you one other thing too. Check this out. This is from Liberty Counsel. They've been sending out fundraising emails, one of which I received. And I'm going to show this to you right here. I'll blow this up so you can see it. They sent it to me directly because, I feel very special about this. Whoops. There we go. Hemmant, it's been 7 years since Kim Davis won all Kentucky office holders the right to religious accommodations that protect them from being forced to violate their faith. But the Davids are still trying to capitalize on the brief moment of fame they engineered back in 2015. This time, they aren't coming for Kim's job. Now they want to take everything Kim and her family own. Like, of all this, they are saying, Kim Davis is the real victim in all of this. The Davids were just out to get her when all she had to do is that. That's all they wanted her to do. She could have used a stamp if she used a stamp, but they wouldn't do it. Kim Davis wouldn't do it. The accommodation they are referring to is that the state of Kentucky, which was under a Republican governor at the time and a right-wing legislature, they basically passed a law saying, you know what? To accommodate Kim Davis, we'll make sure no county clerk ever has to sign a marriage certificate again. And so that's how they did it. So that's what Liberty Counsel is calling a victory, because they just made it so that people like Kim Davis don't have to do the bare minimum. Anyway, a couple other interesting side notes here. In 2018, Kim Davis was in an elected position as county clerk. One of the Davids, David Ermold, actually ran against her for her seat in 2018. He ended up losing in the Democratic primary, which is, that could have been poetic justice. The good news there is that the Democrat ended up winning the race anyway. So since 2018's election, Kim Davis hasn't had a government job. I don't know what she's doing these days except like riding high on like the Christian speaker martyrdom circuit. I have no idea what she does. That's why I was surprised to see her back in the news. I didn't even know this lawsuit was going on at this point. But I will say, Kim Davis, she'll be fine. You know who else will be fine? Joe Kennedy, the praying football coach from Washington State, but actually Florida, who said he was the victim because he couldn't pray at midfield. And you know who else will be fine? Barronelle Stutzman, the Colorado florist who refused to do flowers for a gay couple. She'll be fine. And Lori Smith, the Colorado website designer, who said she didn't want to make a website for a gay wedding, even though literally nobody asked her to do that. All these people pretend they're being persecuted. They pretend they're being victims. All of them will be okay because none of them actually suffered anything because of what they did. They just decided to ride their bigotry as far as it would go. And they all wrongly believe that their faith gives them permission to break the law and discriminate against other people. The only good news right now with this case this week is that finally Kim Davis will personally pay the price for her actions, even if it comes 8 years too late, and even if Liberty Counsel is fundraising to, take care of those legal costs for her. So, yay for some justice, even though it comes far too late. I'm going to check out if there are any private comments, any questions you all have. Let me know while I get ready to share another story with you. This one, this story has several layers. I'm going to tell you how I came to it. This story is about a preacher in Missouri, and someone sent me a little message saying, you should check out what this guy said in church recently because it was messed up. And so I went to go watch what this dude preached a week ago, on a Wednesday night. And I'm going to play the clip for you in just a second here. I will tell you the sound is very soft, but I've tried to enhance it as best I can. But some background on this dude. This is a guy named Rick Morrow. He runs a place called Beulah Church in Richland, Missouri. And he was just doing his regular Wednesday night church service. And I'll just play what he said. You can hear it for yourself, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
It's very crucial. Someone has a physical infirmity and you cast that demon out, you might have to pray for some things to be fixed. Let's talk about one. Let's talk about autism. Rick, did you just go there? Yeah. Like, I know a minister who has seen lots of kids that are autistic, that he cast that demon out and they were healed, and then he had to pray and their brain was rewired and they were fixed. Yeah, I just went there. I mean, you can get online and see lots of examples of it. If it's not demonic, then we have to say God made them that way. Like, that's the only other explanation. Why is my kid have autism? Well, either the devil's attacked them, he's brought this infirmity upon them, he's got them where he wants them, and or God just doesn't like them very much and he made them that way. Well, my God doesn't make junk. God doesn't make mess-ups. God doesn't make people that way. So let's quit being nice and putting a Band-Aid on stuff and giving it medicine. And this goes so much bigger than autism, people. I just gave you that as an example.
That is what that guy said last Wednesday. Just to highlight some of those things that he was talking about, he argued that demons are the cause of autism, which is, believe it or not scientific. He said he knew a minister who has cast that demon out and healed people of autism. Their brain was rewired and they were fixed. First of all, there is no cure for autism. More importantly, if you know a parent who has a kid with autism, they will tell you there is nothing to heal. They will tell you there's nothing about my child that needs to be fixed. In a lot of cases, the autism is pretty mild. It's what makes their kid unique and special. So for this guy to say, this is such a bad problem that demons caused it and another pastor friend of mine can fix it because he's seen it live, things like that, it's deeply offensive to, it should be offensive to everybody, but it's deeply offensive to any parents who have kids with autism. He also then said, what are your two options here? You have to believe demons caused autism, or you must believe that God doesn't like my kid very much and he made him that way. Like, if those are your two options, what are Christian parents thinking at this point? Like, no, God made my kid special and perfect, and quirks, whatever they are, however you want to describe them, those quirks do not make my kid junk or a mess up. So this guy just basically offended all these parents, and not just atheists, but he offended a bunch of Christian parents too. One person put it in the comments underneath his church's website, underneath that live stream sermon. My son's autism may have brought a lot of extra challenges to his life and ours. I'm going to show you this so you could see it with me here. My son's autism may have brought a lot of extra challenges to his life and ours, but he is an absolute blessing. Autism has increased my faith, brought me so many moments of joy, and has taught me many lessons in patience, hope, etc. My son is not junk or a mess up. His growth and successes are nothing short of proof that God has been at constant work in our family. He was created with a purpose. And that's just one parent. There were so many people commenting underneath that post, people saying things like the whole congregation needs to run away, or I'm embarrassed this is in our community. One parent was so offended by what he said, she knew this guy, that she texted him to basically say how her son, who has autism, is a blessing to her, and she explained he doesn't have an illness. She said he's a brilliant child who simply communicates differently. And then she asked Rick Morrow, hey, how do you feel about kids who struggle with Down syndrome? Like, does he say that is something God does, or does he blame that on the demon as well? And you can see for yourself, this is after she asked the question, what What do you think of people with Down syndrome? Look at what he says. Yes, I believe that illness and sickness and conditions that need to be treated came from the devil. So, like, she gave him a chance to redeem himself, and he's like, nope, I'm just doubling down. I'm just going to keep saying, I'm blaming everyone. I'm blaming the devil for anything that makes your child, like, not whatever he believes is perfect. You know what's really funny? Beulah Church, if you go to their website, their tagline is making Jesus famous. And I don't think this is what they had in mind. And here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. This isn't just some fringe pastor who is saying all this stuff. Check this out. Turns out Rick Morrow was recently installed and elected as a school board member in the Stoutland R2 Public School District. This guy is a school board member at a public school district that presumably has a lot of students who have autism, who have individualized education programs, IEPs. And like, if you have a child who has autism and needs some sort of specialized education plan, I mean, there are counselors, there are mental health professionals who can help with that. But the important thing is, what does this guy think they should be doing with those kids? Because in his mind, you know, educating them in a unique way or pulling them out of the classroom or leaving them in a classroom, none of that is a valid option, right? He thinks they should all be like taken in a room somewhere and prayed over, and you got to recite the correct Christian magic words. That's how he thinks autistic kids should be dealt with. So it's one thing for him to say something that is as offensive as it was, but holy crap, this guy is in charge of public education. I don't have a problem with pastors running for school board if they are dedicated to public education and they are good public servants. Same with politicians. I don't care if you're Christian and you run for office if you, respect church-state separation. But this guy is saying something indirectly slamming students in his own district. That's really bothersome. So all of a sudden I post this clip online and it starts going viral. I don't know if I can take full credit for it, but I feel like I am going to take some credit for it. And by the way, if any of this sounds familiar, you may be familiar with Christian preacher Greg Locke in Tennessee, because in 2022, he gave a very similar sermon. He basically said, your kid could be demonized and attacked, but your doctor calls it autism. So he said the same thing, and he got rightly criticized for that too. And by the way, Greg Locke at the time said his evidence for that is that, quote, there ain't no such diagnosis in the Bible. As if that was proof that the devil's responsible for autism. You know what else isn't in the Bible? Glasses, vaccines, anything, any medical advance in the past, like, I don't know, 1800 years, whatever you want to call it. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's not in the Bible. Okay, so this is what the guy said. Just to point out, like, there's good reason to believe autism is hereditary. It's your genetics, and that would mean it's absolutely nothing to do with the devil. Most parents, again, like I said, they will tell you that no matter how difficult it was raising their kid who has autism, they wouldn't trade it for the world because that's their kid. Their kids are special because of their differences, not in spite of them. They're not looking for their kids to be healed or fixed because they don't believe there is anything to heal or fix. And by the way, you can make a Christian argument for why God made them that way too. I don't happen to believe that stuff in general, but again, there are plenty of Christians who disagree with this guy. And it's not harmless either, even if you disagree with the guy. When Greg Locke made his comments last year, a number of adults with autism chimed in to say how harmful that kind of rhetoric was when they were younger, because they were subject to exorcisms. They were traumatized because their church taught them that they were responsible for their disorder, as if they sinned and then God punished them with autism. They were subject to countless prayers, even though there's no cure for autism and even though there was nothing wrong with them. So this Rick Morrow guy, no empathy, no understanding of the issue. He was just fully convinced that anyone with any developmental disorder had a demon problem, and the only solution was more Jesus. Okay, so here's the next part of this. So he did that on a Wednesday. So now we get to Sunday, this past weekend, and he has his next sermon. So what does he do? Does he apologize? What does he say? Because now the backlash has gone pretty viral, and you can't see a comment underneath their church's Facebook page or his personal page or anything without seeing people saying, what the hell is wrong with this guy and his church and any Christian who goes to his church and hasn't run the hell out yet? So he went back on Sunday to address the situation, and I will play you that clip, and you tell me if this solves the problem.
And I made a statement Wednesday night talking about demons, and we're going to keep talking about them on Wednesday night. And I made a statement. I said, let's talk about something demonic, and I said autism. And then I said, God doesn't make junk. Those of you that know me know that I love people, and I would never say that people are junk. It has been perceived that I'm evil, that I am full of the devil, that I am possessed myself, because I said kids with autism are junk. That's what has been perceived. What was intended was autism is junk. People that have it are loved by God and loved by me. Now, I've tried to reach out to some of the mob mentality that's attacking Beulah right now. I can't get anywhere. I have been told that autism is a blessing from God. I have been told that I'm the evil one. But you know what? If I was to stand up here and say cancer is junk, people would agree. If I were to stand up here and say addiction is junk, people would agree. But for some reason, when I shined the light on this subject, it has been blown so far out of proportion.
Has it, though? Has it been blown out of proportion? I don't think it has, because you know what you don't hear in that Sunday sermon? The word sorry, the words I was wrong, the words maybe I should do a little more research before I just talk off the cuff and say the dumbest thing ever. By the way, he said, you guys, everyone's misunderstanding me. I wasn't talking about kids with autism. I was just talking about autism. And that doesn't make anything better, because if you're pretending that autism itself is the problem, then what do you think of kids who have autism? Like, those are not two dots that are hard to connect, buddy. Um, he also compared autism to cancer and addiction, which not even in the same realm. Addiction can be cured with help and treatment. Cancer, there are drugs to fight cancer. Autism, again, there is no cure. There doesn't have to be a cure. Just ask parents who know about it. And by the way, as of Sunday, this guy was still on the school board. And perhaps even more surprisingly to me, he hadn't taken down any of these sermons from the Facebook page. His personal Facebook was still up. The church's social media was still up. So all of this was still up and running. So now we cut to a couple days later. I can't remember if this is Monday or Tuesday of this week, but finally, the update to the story. And this is two things that have happened since Sunday. One, he finally resigned. He resigned from the Stoutland R2 school district, and the school district has only issued a brief statement about it, and it's not on their social media. They just released it to like local news outlets. And basically they said, I'm going to quote here, the district is aware that a member of the Board of Education, in a setting and capacity outside of his board member role, made comments that have been interpreted as derogatory toward individuals with certain disabilities. Like, come on, how weak can you get? Tell us his name. Tell us what he said. Tell us why it was wrong. What's this? Some people have interpreted it as derogatory. We don't think it's derogatory, but some people have interpreted it that way. And then at the end of the statement, they said, I can confirm that the district had received a letter of resignation from the board member, whose name shall not be mentioned, which will be presented to the board as a whole at the next meeting. I think that's next week. So whatever. It's a formality at that point. They'll just vote to get rid of the guy. He'll be replaced eventually. It's a weak statement from the school board. They didn't address anything that was important, like why what he said was wrong. If any students in the district who had autism, who have it, have been affected by anything this guy has done, they didn't address any of that. That's disappointing because they could have done better. And I guess if there's any other update to the story, I just checked before starting this live stream tonight. All of a sudden, the churches, all their social media accounts have been taken down. The church's site on Facebook is down. Rick Morrow's Facebook page is down. Their Instagram, their TikTok, all of that appears to be taken down right now. I don't know how long that'll last, but I think they finally realized how many people were commenting and leaving really upsetting, nasty messages, which arguably were well deserved at that time. So we'll see what happens. I want to keep following up because I'm very curious if this guy faces any punishment from his church, because it looks like it's just him and his wife running the church. So no one's gonna fire this guy. It's a question of whether he will step down. I don't think he will. He'll just keep pretending he's the victim in all of this. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. Den's going to chime in here if there's anything I need to see. He could put it up on the screen here. If you have any comments, I'll just leave a reminder here. You can leave the super like if you want any questions answered. And what is this one? Hey, appreciate the work you do. Thanks for the content. DT, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching as well. I appreciate that. The church's tagline was making Jesus famous. And yeah, more like making Jesus infamous. Very true. Like, of all the ways to make Jesus famous, it's always the pastors who say the wildest, dumbest, like most offensive things too. They're the ones who always want to make Jesus famous. This is interesting. G-Man 717, you were on the news on the new atheism movement. Part of me is like, oh no, what is the new atheism movement we need to be talking about? G-Man, tell me if I have this right. I think what this is referring to, there was a segment, oh my God, and I'm totally blanking. Maybe it was the BBC or no, I'm sorry, Al Jazeera. They did a whole segment covering what atheists on YouTube have been up to and what they are doing and how they are separate from, the Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, that type of new atheism from, 15 years ago. And it was a wonderful segment. I have a link in my Twitter account, but they featured Drew McCoy, who is genetically modified skeptic on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, seriously, look up genetically modified skeptic because I adore that guy. He's wonderful. They also featured Seth Andrews, the thinking atheist. They featured Chrissy Stroop, who is a writer about atheism and other issues involving religion. And yeah, they featured some of my content on there, a lot of other YouTubers that some of you may be familiar with. I thought they did a really nice job explaining what makes these newer YouTubers different than the all religion is poison atheism of like 15 years ago. I think the biggest difference is just having more empathy for people who are religious and kind of helping them out, guiding them out with hopefully, and this is self-serving, but like hopefully helping them out with like a friendly demeanor and saying, look, this, hopefully you can agree with me, even if you are religious. This guy, this pastor, Rick Morrow, that we just talked about, what he said is offensive. It's wrong. Even Christians should be against that. And that sort of thing. And when you offer that sort of mentality, I think you're going to find more viewers on YouTube, including religious people who might say, I'm not there yet. I still believe. But on the issues you're talking about, I agree with you quite a bit. And so again, if you get a chance to watch that, it was on Al Jazeera. And if you just search Al Jazeera New Atheism, I think you'll find it online. Let me jump to this story that I saw because I saw it on like conservative social media. So, that's a rabbit hole that's never going to end well. But basically, I saw screenshots of a recent survey that was conducted by a group called Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE. And this is one of those nonprofit groups that purportedly is all about freedom of speech and freedom of thought, except they tend to ally with a whole bunch of right-wing people who are typically anti-trans and anti-decency and all that stuff. So FIRE has a lot of issues, but that has nothing to do with the survey, and we can question the methodology. And by the way, they get funding from the Koch brothers and all that stuff. But anyway, this survey, I'm going to show you one particular question. This is a survey of 55,000 students who responded to their questionnaire. They opted in from 250 colleges and universities. And the question that was asked, let me see if I could share this with you here. Check this out. I know it's tiny font, but you could see this. How acceptable would you say it is for students to engage in the following action to protest a campus speaker? So if you want to protest a campus speaker, how acceptable is this? And the option, shouting down a speaker to prevent them from speaking on campus. So basically, the question is asking, is it okay to shout down a speaker that you disagree with to stop them from speaking on campus? And I think, I'll come back to this, but like instinctively, all of us probably would say, of course that's wrong. Of course we should always listen to what people say, even if we disagree with them. Isn't that the hallmark of free speech? And by the way, all of us as atheists, we are people who have very unpopular opinions. So the last thing we want is for people to be able to shut down people with dissenting opinions, controversial, unpopular opinions, things like that. So interestingly enough, you could break down their answers by religion. And the blue on the far left side of your screen, that says those are the people who think it is never acceptable to shout down a speaker. And again, you would think, oh, well, at the top, it must be atheists or Jewish people or people who are very liberal, right? But no, if you look at this, look who's at the very top. Protestants, Christians, Mormons, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, or 40% or more of them all say it's never acceptable to shout down a speaker you disagree with. So where are atheists on this list? We are at the very bottom. There's atheists at the very bottom. Only 24% of atheists say it's never acceptable to shout down a speaker. Now, the reason I saw this on like right-wing media outlets is they were basically saying, aha, see, atheism has taken a sharp turn away from whatever those new atheists said a long time ago. They are against free speech. They think it's, at least sometimes, okay to shout down speakers, whereas, you know, conservative Christians, by and large, are generally saying that's not a good idea. So who's interested in free speech now? That's what I saw on a bunch of right-wing websites and Twitter accounts, basically saying, yeah, who's the free speech supporters now? Here's the problem with all of that. Oh, by the way, one of those right-wing people said, literally everything the new atheist told you, the opposite is true. But here's what I think is the problem with that analysis. Like, it's not that people with different beliefs should be shouted down to the point where their opinions can't be heard. Like, I don't support that. And I think a lot of progressives and atheists would feel the same way. Like, if I were watching a debate on God's existence, for example, I could totally listen to the other side, even though I disagree with them. And I hope the person representing my side is good and has strong rebuttals and all of that. I put together a debate like that when I was in college. So I wouldn't want anyone to shout it down. But that is not what we are talking about when it comes to campus speakers. Like, let us not pretend that the people getting shouted down are always good faith proponents of controversial ideas. This is important to know, because think about the last time you read a story in the news about a speaker getting shouted down, probably by progressives on campus. Here's a few, just to give you some examples. There was Ian Hayworth, who denies transgender identities, calls trans women a threat to women's sports, refers to gender-affirming care as genital mutilation. There's Riley Gaines, the college swimmer whose claim to fame is basically placing fifth at a tournament and not beating a trans swimmer, and now her entire life is dedicated to making sure trans women can't compete in sports. There was a story recently of a federal judge, a Trump appointed federal judge with a lifetime tenure, Kyle Duncan, who is a conservative, like, troll comment come to life, who has used his position, his federal judge position, to support same sex marriage bans. He's wanted to take adopted kids away from gay parents. He's misgendered a trans litigant on purpose in an opinion. So, yeah, when that guy came to campus, people shouted him down. There's Charlie Kirk, the Christian nationalist who opposes women's rights and LGBTQ rights. There's Milo Yiannopoulos, whose whole thing is, let me just say whatever will upset, liberals. And the more you get angry, the more inflammatory he gets. Those are the people who get shouted down. And I want to be clear, like, I oppose violence of all kinds. I'm not talking about that. But do you see the common bond here between the types of speakers who get shut down and shouted down? They are not people who just have a different controversial opinion. These are not opinions worth debating. They involve human rights. These are people who actively fight against civil rights, or they support or defend or help write laws that make it harder for marginalized people to exist in society. And at a time when those marginalized people have very little political power to push back, especially if you live in a conservative state, a red state, and under this Supreme Court, maybe a way to fight back is injecting yourself into the narrative when a bigot comes to your campus. That may be the most effective way to make sure everyone kind of understands how serious this is. It's not that progressives can't handle what conservative speakers are saying. It's that we know exactly what conservative speakers are saying because we've heard it before and we deal with it all the time, and we don't believe people's humanity should be up for debate. And a lot of these protesters know that that kind of harmful rhetoric leads to violence against certain groups. So look, I'm sure there are instances you can point out where it goes too far and the protesters are almost comically stereotypical. I'm not going to defend every example of it, but the reason you don't see a lot of stories about conservatives shouting down liberal speakers is because what opinions do liberal speakers have that are equally toxic but in the other direction? Like, how worked up are you going to get when a liberal speaker says we should be inclusive and not ban books and we should try to save the planet and we should be more compassionate and have more dignity in public policy? Those are like progressive liberal ideas that are on campus. Like, there may be really good reasons to shout down a campus speaker, especially if they're a bigot, especially if their entire MO is denying people's existence and making it harder for them to live their lives. So if someone is arguing we shouldn't teach Black history in a comprehensive way because white people might feel bad, or trans people should be exiled from public life, even if they're kids just wanting to play a high school sport, then a polite exchange of ideas is not going to move the needle. Like, if your goal is preventing hateful, harmful ideas from spreading, I kind of understand why people might think shouting down a speaker advocating those beliefs is not out of the question. So that's why I think atheists and agnostics and Jewish people might be open to that kind of protest, because we've seen harmful examples of conservative speakers getting shouted down, and it kind of makes sense. And that's why conservative religious groups are like, I'm fine with it. I would totally be opposed to anyone shouting down a speaker I disagree with, because no one disagrees with them so much on the other side and says something denying who they are and what they believe in. Like, if you saw liberal speakers saying we need to eradicate Christians on college campuses and make sure they don't get accepted to these schools because they're a threat to society, I would bet you some of these conservative groups would start shouting that down too. And they wouldn't necessarily be in the wrong, depending on what's being said, who's saying it, how they're saying it. So, I don't know. The irony in all this is that a lot of those religious conservatives who supposedly love free speech, they're the same groups trying to ban books and trying to make sure kids don't have access to them in public schools. I don't know. For what it's worth, I don't know if you believe me, but I think it is important that we debate controversial ideas. I would much rather see bad ideas challenged than being shot down. But my humanity was never the subject of those debates. And I have a really hard time criticizing trans people and LGBTQ people and their allies and Black people and their allies for taking a different approach, because people are quite literally questioning their right to have their history told and their right to just function in society. So who am I to say they're taking the wrong approach there? Kirk Cameron, the conservative creationist actor and right-wing provocateur as well, he's done a lot of things recently where he's like, I wrote a children's book and I'm going to hold a reading in public libraries across the country. But then he deliberately breaks their rules by saying, like, we're going to have 10 times the number of people that the room can hold. And the libraries will come back and say, well, then you can't have it here. And then he's like, well, then I'm being censored. And then he gets another media blitz off of that publicity. That's what a lot of these conservative people are doing. Like, they deliberately want to provoke progressives because they know they can use that pushback to pretend they're getting canceled, and then they'll get more speaking invites. Like, that's what this is all about. I just don't buy the idea that that conservatives are somehow fans of free speech, but atheists are not. And that survey that Fire posted, totally misleading. I'll pause there to see if there's any other private chats there or donations. I appreciate it. Just a reminder, leave a super chat below. And I will check it out as you do it. Oh, thank you over here to Mike. Oh, dear God, you're going to make me do math live on camera. 300. I should know what that symbol is, shouldn't I? And I don't even know which symbol that is. I apologize. But thank you for your donation, whether it's 1 cent or $1 million. I appreciate it quite a bit. Thank you so much. Let me go to another story. Okay, we're going to talk about testing. Do you all, okay, if you're my age, you probably took the SAT or the ACT when you applied to college, maybe both, because you wanted all your options open. In Florida, under Republican rule, they are now trying to push another type of standardized test that specifically caters to conservative Christians. I don't make the acronym here. I just want to point that out because this is the name of the test. I know what you're thinking, but we're all going to call it the CULT test to make it easier. This is the classic learning test, the CULT test. And basically, in Florida, it's not just an option. Florida's really pushing hard for students to take this. And the Florida Public University system, which covers the University of Florida and Florida State University, two of the biggest schools in the state, they are now saying we will accept your CULT test scores instead of the SAT or ACT if you want to take it. Yes, I see those comments. That is if the students can find it. That is if any of these people can find it. Ha ha ha. We'll get it out of our system. Okay, so here's the thing. If you're trying to take a standardized test, I'm fully on the side of we shouldn't do standardized tests whatsoever. I think in California, their public education system said, we're not going to accept, we're not asking you to submit your SAT or ACT scores. It's optional, but you don't even have to do it. You can just apply and we will look at your recommendation letters. We will look at your GPA, your extracurricular activities. Thank you so much, Alma, for that super chat. I appreciate it. But yeah, they're not even taking standardized tests. That's the way to go because I think there's a lot of biases involved. And the whole point of standardized tests is that you can game the system. You, as the Varsity Blues scandals show, like you can, even if you don't cheat your way into the system, you can take test prep classes to learn how to score higher. It has nothing to do with how good you are in class. So I don't like standardized tests. But this whole thing, this push to get the CULT test accepted, it's part of a larger push by Ron DeSantis to basically harm public education any way he can, or to diminish what we think of when we think of public education. Just to remind people who don't follow Florida politics, DeSantis and his Republican allies, they have already used their power to ban textbooks that they called too woke. They want to put more guns in more schools. They criticized AP African American studies, because it made white people feel bad. They made it easier for people to censor any kind of books in school. They have called for the end of tenure in higher education. And their allies conducted what some people called a hostile takeover of one particular college that Republicans deemed too progressive. And they basically decimated that place. And so this is their latest gambit, which is to get this cult test accepted. And I'll tell you about the cult test in just a second, but just to give you some numbers here. The SAT in 2022, last year, 1.7 million students took the SAT. 1.3 million students took the ACT. How many people took the CLT? Well, since 2015, in 7+ years, 21,000 kids have taken it. That's it. Not like last year. I mean, in the past 7 years, it's been a few thousand kids have taken it. 85% of them are white. 99% of them either attend private schools or charter schools, or they are homeschooled. The point is, the CLT doesn't have some big track record. There's not a lot of data that people can analyze to see if it's a worthwhile test or a worthwhile assessment to see if you're ready for college and if you know the stuff you ought to know before you start college. That's why they shouldn't be using it. Earlier this week, when they were deciding this, though, one of the people on the board of governors of the Florida university system basically voted against their using the CLT. And her basic argument is there's just no information on whether this test is useful. She said, I am not against allowing the use of the CLT. I oppose the use of it at this time because we do not have the empirical evidence to show that this assessment is of the same quality as the ACT and the SAT. So, that's the right answer. We just don't have enough information about this test to see if it's any good. So, what is this test? Why do conservative Christians like it so much? Why is it that the only schools before this week, the only schools that really accepted this test were the conservative Christian colleges, like Hillsdale College in Michigan, and places like that? Well, let me tell you. Here's the thing about the classic learning test. When they say classic, they basically highlight the centrality of the Western tradition. That's what they say on their website, the centrality of the Western tradition, which is basically code for we really love dead white men, mostly Western Europeans, mostly Judeo-Christians, and any sort of modern writing, the sort of thing kids might interact with these days, any writing about race from a modern perspective, out the window. We're not going to cover that. The ACT may cover that. The SAT may feature a passage from Ta-Nehisi Coates or Isabel Wilkerson or someone, but not the CLT. No. We're going back to the 1700s, which is the only writing kids need to know about. One passage that they have on a sample test on their website, it featured a section from St. Teresa of Avila's The Way of Perfection, which is a religious piece of writing from centuries ago. And here's the thing. A religious passage like that might appear on the SAT because they have a really deep well of options because they don't limit where their writing passages come from. But the CLT emphasizes faith-based works and whatever they think are the classics. Another problem with this is that when a writer for Mother Jones took a practice CLT test last month, they even pointed out how some of the questions could be answered correctly without even looking at the passage. If I can get rid of the obvious wrong answer, and there's only a couple maybe answers left, and one of them is clearly not the direction they want me to go, you could, logic your way into the right answer without actually knowing anything. You know what I mean? So that was a problem with the test. Another problem is that some of the questions were so pointlessly easy that what are you even testing them on anymore? Here's another thing. The College Board itself, the College Board, by the way, oversees AP classes and AP tests, and they also oversee the SATs. So they have a vested interest in preserving their brand, but they also said when they reviewed a published CLT test, they found that 25% of the questions were below high school level. So they didn't test statistics, for example. And the SAT, on the other hand, is aligned to high school grade levels represented in state standards. So it's you're not even quizzing them on the stuff they ought to know in high school. So For all these reasons, you shouldn't really be taking the CLT test seriously. But in Florida, they're elevating this test to pretend that it's just as good. And there's no reason to think it's that good. And I think part of me is thinking like, come on, I took the SAT and ACT. I could not for the life of me tell you what passages I read because who cares? I read it, I answered my questions, I moved on. It didn't leave a mark on me. So who cares if there are religious passages on this exam, especially if the questions have nothing to do with religion per se. And here's the thing, here's the secret that you need to think about. If the CLT is accepted into Florida universities, and it's the school that a lot of academically gifted students want to go to because they're going to stay in state, how do you think their teachers are going to help them prepare to take these standardized tests? You know, when I was in school, my teachers on certain days, we would do a practice section of the SAT or the ACT. In English class, we would do practice passages and try to answer the questions. What do you think they're going to do when it comes to the CLT? The way you help students prepare for an exam that has a lot of faith-based essays is you give students a lot of religious material that you can then ask them questions about. That's what this is really about. It's another way to shove religion into public schools without explicitly saying you are trying to shove religion into public schools. That's the problem with this. That's why they are doing this. It's not that the CLT directly promotes religion, but it indirectly sends the message that understanding religious writing can be beneficial. And for now, it limits the options of where high school students who take the exam can go, since the good colleges, at least outside of Florida, don't really take this test seriously. I should also point out, in Florida, they offer a scholarship called the Bright Future Scholarship Program. Basically, if you're one of the top students academically in your high school, you can apply for this scholarship. And if you promise to stay at a Florida college and you're going to go to a Florida university, a good chunk of your tuition could be paid off. Well, in order to apply for that benefit and in order to apply for that scholarship, Florida lawmakers earlier this year voted to say, yeah, we'll accept the cult test for that too. And only 3 lawmakers in the House voted against it. One of them was State Representative Anna Escamani, who's fantastic, but she pointed out, this is her comment, it's politically motivated to insert religion into our public institutions. As a firm believer of church-state separation, I don't think it's appropriate for a religious test to be used when it comes to our public universities. And that, I think, is exactly how anyone should be thinking about it. By the way, one more piece of evidence that the CLT shouldn't be taken that seriously. The director of marketing for the exam, she talked about, like, you guys, why are you all mad at us about this exam? There's no political motivation on it. And here's what she said, quote, students will be reading authors that are both atheist and religious. They'll be reading Karl Marx as well as Adam Smith. Her example of the atheist that kids would be reading is Karl Marx, the communist. She's trying to link those two things as if atheism and communism are just one and the same thing. You know what I mean? Just a messed up thing. Look, if Florida says here's the other problem. If Florida says the cult test can be used in admissions for Florida colleges, you know how other red states are going to react. They're going to start doing the exact same thing. They're going to say, oh, well, in our universities where we have a legislature that can do this, we're going to start accepting it too. And if the colleges say no, we'll just appoint our cronies to their board of trustees. Like, all these red states are so desperate to approve anything that grants more legitimacy to religious writing and conservative thought. And just going back to what I said earlier, I wish more colleges would just get rid of standardized testing altogether and not take it seriously at all. But if they are going to take the SAT and ACT scores, and if students are planning to take those tests, then they really shouldn't be taking this bad Christian movie, Christian music version. It's always like a crappy version of the real thing. Like, you know how God's Not Dead is a crappy version of a good movie and Christian music is a crappy version of real music? Well, the CLT is a crappy version of the SAT and ACT. And again, those tests, as with their flaws, They are battle tested. They are well known. There's been studies on them for years. We know what that devil looks like. Very few people know what the CLT looks like, which is the problem. I'll stop there. If there's any other private chats or comments, feel free to put them up on here. From I assume the folks who own the CLT tests are donors or something. Seems like a financial decision, not necessarily a weird religious one. So, interesting thing. The CLT, if you go to the website, you could see their like board of advisors, and it is a mix of just a wild group of people. It's a bunch of conservative Christian college leaders. You have conservative activists like Christopher Rufo. You have Cornel West, that the third party Green Party candidate for president who's trying to give votes to Donald Trump. I don't know why. But you have that mix of just right-wing people. And you can almost certainly bet there are right-wing groups trying to push for this test to be accepted in more places because it takes down the College Board a peg. Because again, they run the SAT. So yeah, I don't really have in front of me the name of any group that's donating to it, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Dan, are there any other questions or anything before I go to the next section? It's all good. Let me show you my favorite clip of the week. It's our good friend Greg Locke. I'm going to show you the clip. Greg Locke, the Christian hate preacher, he has taken on a new enemy. And his whole thing for the past several months has been deliverance ministry. He can cure you of the devil because the devil is the cause of all of your problems. And he was telling a story recently where he said, like, at his house, on top of the fridge, there's these two owl statues that were there. So he would see them every time he goes to the fridge. Haha, cutesy, whatever. But then he started getting these, maybe he felt weird or his stomach hurt or something like that. And he tried medicine and it didn't work. And like the voice in his head, God, told him it's the owls. And so we had to get rid of the owls, you see. Let me play you the clip, and here's where he went from there.
You know what's interesting? That the Illuminati's main symbol is an owl, a creature of the night. Now, I'm not telling you that owls are demons. I am telling you that Lilith many times will come in the form of an owl. I will tell you that. Because it's a creature of the night that is a representation of demonic powers in the Old Testament. And is a representation of demonic powers against all of the tyrannical people that we call out on the left right now. They celebrate the owl god.
This was news to me. I did not know I had a god. I did not know my god was an owl god. I know what you're... I think he's really mad because owls like symbolize wisdom, and that goes against everything he can imagine. Who is the owl god? Yes, great question. I have no idea. Who is it? Joke done. I'm good now. I had to get that one out of my system as well. The funniest thing is if you go to Facebook right now and you search for Greg Locke and owls, there are so many memes about like, here's how I will respond to Greg Locke, and it's just pictures of owls everywhere, and people saying I'm gonna go to his church with a Tootsie Pop just to scare the bejesus out of him. That's what Greg Locke is teaching these people. Listen, I'm right there with you. No one keeps me up to date on the animal gods. No one keeps me up to date on what atheists should believe. I don't know what it's going to be next week. I assume if he's saying owls are of the devil right now, we will be moving on to a different animal very soon. Yes, Athena had an owl. That is very true. And, those are those pagan gods, so we can't have that. I think he's also worried because owls like can rotate their heads and see everything. And I think Greg Locke is not a fan of transparency either. So there are many reasons he does not love the owls. But yes, I think we all need to start hailing the owl. It is our new god. At least this one exists. There are many of them. And it's nocturnal, which is like a special power that they have. So more power to the owl gods. God is an awesome God who reigns from heaven above. Yes, the owl god does reign from above, and then get the it's a bird of prey. It can get what it wants. See, that was supposed to go on the CLT story. Can't believe you missed it. All right, we are going to move on to the next story, which involves the community library network in Post Falls, Idaho. Dan, I'm gonna ask you a favor. Remove the word licks before I go to the next story. Otherwise, people on YouTube are gonna have questions. So this story comes out of Idaho somewhere. And basically, it involves something called the Community Library Network in Post Falls, Idaho. It's on the western part of the Panhandle. This is a library system that oversees 7 different buildings and a bookmobile. And its board of trustees, like any board of trustees, they have to keep an eye on the budget. That's what you want them to do. So back in July, they were having a discussion about whether they should reduce or eliminate Sunday hours for the whole system. Like, should we just close down all of our libraries on Sunday because we're keeping them open? Maybe people are not using them. It's expensive, and that's a way we could save money. So what they found out at that meeting is if you close the libraries on Sunday, you would reduce one part-time position at every library, and it would save you about $28,000 a year in total when you add up everything. So $28,000 if you shut down the library on Sundays. On the other hand, what they were told at the meeting is a lot of people use the library on Sunday. They were told that how many people access the internet? A lot. How many times the study rooms were booked by students who were trying to study with their friends or by themselves. People were using the libraries on Sunday. So if you closed it, it would hurt the community. So they discussed all that, but they didn't take a vote at the time. And all of that is a normal conversation for a library board of trustees to have, whether or not they vote to close them or not. But this is the part I want to show you because it's a 5-member board, and the board chair, her name is Rochelle Atheism. She argued that the library should remain closed on Sunday for a very different reason. Let me play you what she said at that meeting in July.
Well, I know many at these tables don't subscribe to this, but the Lord blesses people and we keep the Sabbath day holy. I think having people work on Sunday is actually to our detriment. I'm pretty sure.
Remove that. There we go. She said, the Lord blesses people who keep the Sabbath day holy. I think having people work on Sunday is actually to our detriment. Like, we should close the library on Sunday because, Jesus said so. One board member at the time chimed in to say, I'm paraphrasing here, that's batshit crazy. What she actually said was, I'm pretty sure not everybody in this community holds to that. So I think we need to look at our whole community concerning ours. So interesting. So a few days later, they had another meeting with the same board of trustees. And this time, Atheism spoke again. And this time, she came prepared with the Bible in hand. Here is that clip.
So as far as closing on Sundays, most other government entities are closed on Sundays. This is not an emergency service. No one's going to bleed out if they don't get a book on Sunday. Anyway, Exodus 28-10 says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within the gates. So it sounds like we shouldn't be causing other people to work as well as not working ourselves.
I'm sorry, this is a government agency and we need to be available for everyone.
Kudos to that board member at the very end there, just shouting that one down. Like, what are you doing? You're quoting the Bible and saying that's the reason we shouldn't make other people work. How much do you want to bet Rochelle Atheism goes to a restaurant on Sundays where people have to serve her? So she probably causes other people to work on Sundays all the time. But that person chimed in to say this is a government agency. You can't play that game. another trustee, not in the clip, but also said some religions consider Saturday to be the Sabbath day. So what up with that? And she had no response to that. But she did bring up how the founding fathers are on her side here. And she said, it's in our best interests to not dishonor God. So since that time, starting last month, Americans United for Separation of Church and State stepped in to warn the board that if they close down on Sundays for religious reasons, that could violate the Establishment Clause, and the board has a legal obligation to refuse to act on Miss Ottison's religious grounds. This week, the Freedom from Religion Foundation chimed in, or at least this month, and they said she needs to stop promoting her personal religious beliefs at these meetings. It's unconstitutional. And again, this whole issue, this has nothing to do with whether or not the library should close on Sundays. That's an issue they're going to have to deal with, and whatever, I don't have a stake in it one way or the other. But they cannot shut down the library on Sunday because God wants them to. That's where they're going to come into a problem. By the way, 3 of the 5 board members, including Ottison, they were all elected recently over the summer after running on a campaign promoting censorship and keeping books that they think are offensive out of the hands of kids. So keep that in mind. People, vote in local elections. It matters because these people all vote, and they all vote for the craziest members of their group. So here's what happened recently. Those 3 members, the conservatives on this 5-member board, they did vote to close the library on Sundays. But after they did that, the board's attorney is like, you guys, we may be opening the door to litigation here because you just voted on that after all the batshit crazy stuff about, Exodus, or whatever the Bible said. And then the same board voted 4-1 to table the Sunday closures, even though they already voted to close them. I don't know what the hell's going on. What I do know is these people are setting themselves up for a big mistake. If they can't justify their Sunday closures for secular reasons, they're going to be in for a world of trouble. By the way, that same 3-member conservative majority, they also suggested at a recent meeting we should disaffiliate from the American Library Association because they called it ultra-liberal, and they said, how dare it oppose censorship because it hates the family and traditional religious values. That's what happens when you allow these people to take over anything. A school board, a library board, city council, like they will just take the most insane positions possible because there's no one there to stop them. Just a messed up situation completely. I'll pause there. Is there any other chats or comments? Now's your time to get them in. Joe's writes, also run in local elections. It's feasible for a lot of people. Don't just vote run. People need a choice. Thank you, transitional old lady. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. I think one of the problems is conservatives who tend to be more ignorant on these things are so confident in their own abilities, and progressives who should run in these things are always self-critical. Like, I'm not the best person for the job. There might be other people to run for these positions. And it's like, no, that's you. You go run. And it doesn't have to be for like Congress. You, like I said, school board, library trustee. Those are local positions that get very little attention, but are so important for the community. Please consider running for some of these seats. They're super important. Let me do one more story and then I'll just finish off with a fun one. This one involves the American Family Association, which is one of those right-wing Christian hate groups that's just vehemently anti-gay. The American Family Association is being sued by a former employee who held a position of power in the group. Why? For same-sex sexual misconduct and retaliatory behavior. And the details here get extremely wild. I'm going to leave this up here just so you can see what we are talking about. I want to share this and I'll put this up here so you could see it. This is the lawsuit. It's from a guy named Robert Chambers. And Robert Chambers spent nearly 7 years from 2015 to 2022 working for the American Family Association. The AFA, by the way, it's the same group that oversees the One Mom at 1 Million Moms, which boycotts everything in sight. They sponsored a show hosted by a right-wing bigot named Brian Fisher. They launch boycotts against every company they think is too progressive. So this guy, Chambers, he was their vice president of policy and legislative affairs. He was executive vice president of AFA Action, which is their lobbying arm. And he was a member of AFA Action's board of directors. So he's not a random dude you can write off as a random employee. This is a guy in leadership position. This guy once appeared on a Christian show and blamed Satan for why so many people criticized anti-LGBTQ laws. And so this guy was in it for the long haul, right? But he's suing the organization and many of their leaders for ignoring his claims of sexual harassment, creating a hostile work environment, threatening to withhold his severance package until he agreed to keep his mouth shut, and more. So I'm going to go through some of those details here, but just to give you an idea, the AFA has a budget of roughly $28 million a year. They use that money to hurt LGBTQ people and marginalized communities. And just last year, ProPublica reported that AFA changed its IRS designation from a regular nonprofit, which does have to report how it spends its money and how much it takes in. They changed it from a nonprofit to a church, which means they don't have to disclose where their money is coming from and where it's going and how much they have at their disposal. So that's shady as hell. So here's some of what they said. Here's one of the allegations that Robert Chambers made. One allegation was against Rob Cook, their director of localization. According to the lawsuit, Chambers says Cook said Cook made repeated, escalating, sexually suggestive comments to him, including comments made while grabbing Chambers' face and ear. He called these, I'm going to show you this right here. He called these comments homoerotically charged, and you can read some of them right here. They include comments like, "I see you're really good with that wrist action. I wonder how you got to be so good at that." I don't even know what that's in reference to, what Chambers was doing, but also, ew. Then you got, "Now you don't want me to get a hold of you, do you? You'd really like that, wouldn't you? You'd like me to take you and get a hold of you." Honestly, this is very awkward flirting, but it's also totally inappropriate in the workplace. And this is from one guy working at the AFA to another guy working at the AFA. So that's messed up. If two gay men said that in the workplace and AFA found out about it, AFA would be calling for a boycott of the entire company. But when some dude working for the AFA makes these references to like masturbation, it's just locker room talk, apparently, right? So Robert Chambers, he reported this to his bosses. And the bosses said, "Wow, you're not the only guy who's complained about this other guy making these comments." But guess what happened? Nothing ever came of those complaints. In fact, the guy who made those comments, according to Religion News Service, his LinkedIn profile still says he works at the AFA, but his Facebook page describes him as a former AFA member, and the AFA wouldn't confirm whether or not he was still working for them, but that's a little weird. But the point is, that guy faced no real consequences as far as we know, so that's messed up. Another thing that happened, in 2019, there's a blogger named David Carey Hart who writes about church-state separation and finances, and he pointed out how AFA Action, the lobbying arm of the AFA, they didn't file the right paperwork with the IRS for 2 years. He also pointed out that AFA lied on its tax returns because they said they had no related organizations, even though they had this lobbying arm, which is a related organization. So Robert Chambers saw that blog post, probably had a Google alert for this company, right? And he got worried that the AFA was doing something wrong, because they were. So he said he brought that up with AFA's like leaders at the organization. He said, "Are we like not transparent here? Because it seems like we lack transparency. Seems like we have accounting irregularities. And also the PO boxes for our companies are all the same, and we shouldn't be doing that." And what did the leader at AFA say at the time? According to, I'm I want to share this here. According to Robert Chambers' lawsuit, look at this. The response he got, "I'm glad about their confusion." Smiley face emoji. He's referring to like the liberal blogger who was a watchdog and maybe the IRS. The guy working at the FA was very happy about their confusion. So that's messed up. And guess what? 2 months later, the IRS revoked the tax exempt status of the lobbying group, which confirmed they filed the wrong paperwork. I should say AFA Action is now re-registered and they're tax exempt again, but I'm just saying the blogger was right and Chambers was right to raise the concern. And Robert Chambers also says in the lawsuit he's concerned about possible embezzlement within the organization, and he asked AFA's leaders to do an audit of the lobbying arm to make sure donations to one weren't getting mixed up with donations for the other. He says those requests were ignored. So that's messed up. But here's the most messed up part of this lawsuit. It involves a baby. Are you ready for this? Oh my God. So it turns out there is one person who works at the organization. Her name is Lexi Wildman. I think it's Wildman. She's like, it's one family that runs this organization, and they all, people of the same last name, run this place. So anyway, Lexi one day had a dream about Robert Chambers and told him all about it. And I'm going to show you what Lexi Wildeman said. She said, according to Chambers, let's see if you could see this here. She told him that she dreamed that Chambers kissed her baby on the mouth. That did not happen. She dreamed that happened, but she shared that with him. And then she said Chambers was still a threat to the sexual innocence of children. She said she couldn't bring her kids to the office because she feared Chambers would harm them. And then she started telling everyone at work about her dream and why Robert Chambers could be a threat. Again, this was a dream. He says he didn't do anything. He didn't have any interaction with her baby. And by the way, that's actually a form of sexual harassment, saying this guy sexually harassed someone in my dream, and it's involving a baby and stuff. So that's a form of sexual harassment that he's like, it's just a lie. None of that happened, but it led to reputational damage on Chambers' part. So after all of this, he says, even though the company had a policy prohibiting sexual misconduct, and even though they had a policy saying whistleblowers wouldn't be punished, he was punished for speaking out. He said in September of 2022, he was fired after raising his concerns again about Cook, the guy who made all those weird flirty remarks to him, for the 10th time, he says. He complained about him, and he complained about the woman spreading the lie about the baby dream for the 4th time, and they fired him. And why was he dismissed? According to AFA leaders, it's because he didn't have respect for leadership. What did he do against the leaders? No one knows. He says they didn't elaborate, but they insisted that his issues with those other people were not the reasons he was being fired. He actually includes a very detailed transcript of his conversation with the AFA's leader. Check this out. The plaintiff is Robert Chambers here. Well, the timing is really interesting, Ed. After I bring up about being sexually harassed and then bringing up something that someone else told me that they were had dreams about me and their child. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call that I'm being terminated, but it doesn't have anything to do with that. The timing is really odd. And then this guy who's a leader at the AFA says, it may seem that way, Rob. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you besides the fact that we just don't discuss these kinds of issues. It's just trails off. That's a conversation those two dudes had. The lawsuit also says that after Chambers was let go, AFA employees were told that he was fired because of a disagreement of philosophy, which suggests that Robert Chambers was no longer a good Christian because they define Christian in a very narrow way. But there's no reason to think Robert Chambers had changed his views on anything. But they're basically saying, guys, don't interact with this dude because he's not a good Christian like the rest of you. So that's not only a lie, that's actually harming him in the process. It's a form of retaliation. And here's the last thing. He was owed severance after his firing, But he says the agreement, the severance agreement that he had to sign included a poison pill. He would only get the money he was owed if he basically promised never to talk shit about the AFA. And you can see this here. The group said he owed them a continual duty of loyalty. Here's the part of the severance agreement right there. You hereby agree that during the time you are employed by AFA and thereafter, you owe a continual duty of loyalty to AFA, which includes refraining from disparaging any part of our organization, including on social media. So don't talk about us in public. Don't trash us in public. That was like, what is this? You owe continual duty to us. That's messed up. So he had the choice. Does he want the money, which was a lot of money because he'd been working there for a while, or does he want the ability to speak out against what he sees is unfair and wrong? He chose not to take the money, and now he's suing them. The AFA, of course, denies all of this. They wrote a statement. They sent a statement to Religion News Service saying, since 1977, our ministry has continued to maintain the highest standards of morality and personal conduct for our staff and leadership. The claims made against our organization by a disgruntled former employee are unfounded, gross mischaracterizations of the facts. Like, is that really what this is all about? Because I would have a easier time believing that if AFA's definition of morality and personal conduct and the highest standards of morality, these are the people who once filed a brief urging the Supreme Court not to repeal anti-sodomy laws that punished gay men who have sex in the privacy of their own home. And it is really hard to claim Chambers is disgruntled when he regurgitated the party line for so long in public. And by the way, the AFA claims the facts are gross mischaracterizations, not lies. They're saying he exaggerated, not that he made things up, which the wording there suggests there's some underlying truth to what he's saying, which is interesting. And so I don't know what's going to happen. This will go to court. We'll see what happens to AFA. I just want to point out one other thing, because some of you, like me, you may be tempted to think good for Robert Chambers. That guy's a hero. Good for him for going after that. And I would warn you not to think that way. Chambers is not a hero here. He spent his career working for the AFA, the American Family Association. He worked to enshrine Christian nationalism into the law. The policies that he personally pushed for, they hurt women, they hurt gay people, they hurt trans people, they hurt refugees. He claimed a monumental piece of voting rights legislation would be the end of free and fair elections if Democrats passed it. He said if Democrats won the 2018 midterm elections, it would be a disaster because, quote, they would fight for abortion rights and Planned Parenthood funding, insist on open borders and amnesty, and demand liberal judges. All of which sounds great. He said Christians who support LGBTQ rights, even if they're personally opposed to same-sex marriage, were being unbiblical. He also condemned the head of the Republican National Committee because she forged an alliance with a group for gay Republicans. Like, none of that is an excuse. Like, I'm not saying he deserved to be harassed or mistreated at work. Of course he didn't. But it's just a reminder that the same people who insist Christianity is synonymous with goodness, they have no problem covering up bad behavior by those same Christians until it affects them personally. So, like, this guy, I hope he goes to court. I hope he gets everything he can from the AFA, but it doesn't mean he deserves any sympathy from us at all. Den, is there anything else in the mix here that I need to look at? Otherwise, I'm going to jump to the very end because, of course, I have a couple of tweets to share with you. Just waiting for friendly atheist presidential run. That's very kind of you. One, look, I'm voting for Biden. I don't care if I don't love the guy. I'm still voting for him. Second thing is, here's the thing. I am telling people to run for office, local office. I think I have spent the past almost 20 years of my life creating a permanent paper trail that exists online of every stupid thought I've ever had. I would be an opposition researcher's wet dream, because there's so many stupid things I've said that I now regret, but you could easily use that stuff against me. So I'm very hesitant. Even though I admire people who run for office, I don't think I could do it for that reason, because I want good progressives to win those races. And I'm perfectly fine with not being the dude on the ballot. I'm so happy to vote for them and donate to them and support them. And that's why I don't think I could run for any of these things. But I don't feel like a hypocrite for telling other people to run. Let me end by sharing just a couple of lovely tweets with you here from our good friend, the Transformed Wife. This is one of them. You may have seen this from Jenna Ellis, the indicted co-conspirator with Donald Trump, where she said Lauren Boebert getting kicked out of that theater in Denver where she was watching the musical Beetlejuice for being loud, disruptive, vaping, and video recording after being asked multiple times to stop is embarrassing and disrespectful. And here's the thing, Jenna Ellis kind of has a point, because if you've seen the video, you can see Lauren Boebert, that congresswoman and MAGA cultist. You could see her vaping even next to a pregnant woman. You could see her groping the guy she's with, like grabbing him. You could see him grabbing her. Like, there's security footage of all of this. And again, as a guy who likes theater, why are you doing that in the audience? Save it for when you get home. What do you stop ruining the experience for everyone? So Jenna Ellis kind of has a point. Lauren Boebert was being disrespectful. What does the Transformed Wife say? Lauren should be home caring for her husband, whom she's divorcing, and her children, where she belongs, not being a politician and an embarrassment to her family. Like, I'm right there with her when it comes to embarrassment to her family. And I don't care about her personal life. I don't care about Boebert's dating life and stuff. But I do find it funny that given the material that the Transformed Wife has to work with here. Oh, thank you. I forgot to mention this. Yes, and when they left, Lauren Boebert flipped them off. She did that to the security cameras and security people. Anyway, the argument here from the Transformed Wife is, yes, Lauren Boebert is bad because she should be a housewife, and not because everything she does is just pure evil and trashy and all that stuff. Like, come on, of all the reasons you don't like Boebert, that's the reason you're going with? Like, give it a rest. That's a horrible reason to not like her. There's so many good ones. She gives it every day. And one, this last one finally, the Transformed Wife also has opinions on the NFL. I'm sure you were waiting for her opinions on the NFL. Women shouldn't be referees or announcers in the NFL. Why do women need to invade all of the men's spaces? Haven't they seen enough of the ugly fruit it has produced? Men invading their spaces, bathrooms, locker rooms, sports. Men are not invading those spaces at all. But also, I'm trying to understand, even from her perspective, if a woman is the announcer for an NFL game and they're doing the job and they're doing it well, or they're referees in the game, who does that hurt? Why does that hurt anybody? Like, if you're a referee, you couldn't be a referee in the NFL unless you could keep up with the pace of the game and see the stuff you're supposed to see. And if you can be a referee in any professional sports league, oh my God, you're incredible. But also, if you're an announcer, you're far away from the athletes. You're just telling people at home what people are doing. I don't know why that needs to be gender segregated, or why she thinks that needs to be a male job. I know traditionally it has been, but like, that doesn't even involve playing the sport. That's just talking. I mean, the answer is she just doesn't think women should be working, period. They should just be housewives and everyone should survive on one income, and everything is in the 1950s and everyone is white and everything is perfect and no one has any problems. But, women are announcers. Therefore, everything is horrible. I love her tweets because it reminds me that no matter how many doubts I ever have about myself or anything, there's always someone who's even crazier. Does she have an opinion on whether women should tweet or not? Says Den, who's helping me out with moderation here. That comment has been brought up. Like, why is she so much on social media? And she feels that when she says women shouldn't be teachers in church or something, she's talking specifically in church. So promoting Christianity on social media, that's not anti-biblical. That's totally fine. So she doesn't feel that's hypocritical at all. This is an interesting one. She does not want women to have careers, unlike her that she totally does not have a career as an influencer. She is an influencer. She's a social media influencer. I don't know if she gets paid for it, but there's a lot of those fundamentalist Christian women who urge women to buy their courses, to get advice from them, to pay for their books and stuff. And they feel that is distinct from having a job outside the home or trying to be a pastor or a Bible teacher or anything like that. Is it hypocritical? Arguably, but it also, one of the reasons I kind of enjoy The Transformed Wife is because I feel like most of my news feed is very political and very angry for good reason, because there's a lot of stuff to be angry about. And then out of nowhere, she's like, women shouldn't be NFL announcers. And it's like, oh, right. There are other people who have crazy opinions that are not in the realm of things I think about on a regular basis. Just insane. Hey, I think I'm done tonight. If you have any last second comments, feel free to mention them. If you are here, I appreciate that you spent your Friday night with me. Remember, you could support this channel by going to patreon.com/Hemant. You can always leave a super like. And many thanks to Den, who is helping me out with the moderation tonight. Den, it means a lot that you're helping out. Thank you so much. It made this a lot smoother for me. And thank you all for joining. If there's nothing else, I will see you next week. Have a good one, everyone. Have a good weekend.